This session mainly, because we are almost we are very late, so I will try to be very quick. This session is about current ICT and education successes, and allow me to start with our first speaker. Is Professor Hamidou Boly. He will be speaking about achievements and opportunities of the use of the internet in education in West Africa. He is actually now he's leading the He's leading the ECOWAS Commission for Education, and he was also president of the University of okay. So please, Professor.
So, good morning, everyone. I think that maybe he forgot to let you know that I'm from Burkina. That means my first international language is French. And then I would like those who are not familiar to French to use the headset. Are able to follow up a little bit what I'm going to say. I will speak in French. So those who are Anglophone, please use your headphones. What is happening? Can you? Yeah, donc je vais...
I'm going to We're going to present what we do at ECOWAS. The theme is successes and opportunities, what we've achieved at ECOWAS. First slide is about, let me talk about ECOWAS. It's West African the economic organization of the 15 West African countries, created in 1975. So we are about 42 years. It's 5,000 square kilometers and with 350 million people. This is a community with a commission based in Abuja, Nigeria, with 15 commissioners. You know some of the commissioners, the commissions, security and peace, which allow to intervene in Mali, Guinea-Bissau, and recently, you know, we were in the Gambia. We have a commission on free movement, which allows citizens to move around freely. We'll have an economic commission, which will have us, which will help us have a unique currency. We have a common bank. We also have EcoBank. We have transport companies. We have no donors. We take percentages of all taxes in the region, which is amounts to about $800 million a year. It's a very dynamic which is going to inspire the African Union in its financing to develop ourselves. New countries want to be members, Morocco, Tunisia, because this is a community which is very dynamic. We have 15 commissioners. I'm a commissioner for education, science, and culture. It's the UNESCO model. We also have in this department, let's go to the next slide. Our mission is coherence and harmonization of national educational policies to facilitate mobility. That there are no borders in our community. Everybody can move around freely and do business whenever they want. All fees are harmonized, degrees are harmonized, so we're an integrated space. Our priorities is higher learning and promotion of education. We have cross programs from alphabetization, literacy, the fight against AIDS, etc. Specific programs, we have 9 of those. We have scholarships, we call that ENAMS. Regional students benefit from that fund. We have professional training program. We have educational system. One of the last programs here, which is not least, but we're going to talk more about this, is the e-learning initiative, ECOWAS e-learning initiative. In 2012, we came up with a regional strategy to see how we're going to work in this sector. And this is a document that you can look up online, our strategy. All offers in telecommunication are examined to support education in the region, from satellite and to cable, anything wireless. ECOWAS invests on a satellite together with Nigeria, which has a big program and big institutes to provide satellite coverage in the region. We have submarine cables. We have 3 of those, and many countries are served, except Guinea-Bissau, which is not finalized yet, but they're working on it to connect to the rest of the world. We'll also have intra-country to communicate, and those are very good programs. In this strategy document, we've also reviewed all the initiatives in the 15 countries. We know who is intervening in this country. Let's take Ghana. There are many initiatives, many partners with many actions, and countries have activities developed within ministries or president's offices to promote this educational system using modern tools. And this strategic program document in Ghana, for instance, but because we're not exhaustive here, but there are many initiatives with Google, Microsoft, and these are things that are happening, and we need to be aware of that and be able to harmonize and organize that action. So this strategy gives information per country, and on the regional level, we want to have good information about what's going on and capitalize on those and share with others to allow a better use. Next, in terms of information on bandwidth and connectivity within countries, this strategy gives you information on what's available in terms of weaknesses and strengths within connectivity in countries. You have submarine cable configuration on the continent. This is a 2012 based information. We have 3 major cables on the continent, and up to Nigeria, for instance, we have 4, but you also have Benin, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, with good access that can serve inland communities as well. You'll see that ECOWAS countries, as you see, the connectivity remains expensive. So, but compared to Southern African countries or Northern Africa, the access cost is relatively high in our countries, and we want to address that and improve. You see here information per country. Higher learning institutions systems do not really have a good bandwidth to allow the flow of information as it should. That's why we've been partnering and encouraging technicians, computer experts to improve the technical system, to improve access in different countries for access to bandwidth in higher learning institutions, to allow our researchers to communicate with the rest of the world. And we support this organization with that group of technicians to help the region to have a better organized approach and coherent approach. This strategy, as you can see, we will have a whole process within the vision with a green area. What we want to do within ECOWAS, we want to position ourselves as a region where internet is a development tool and a knowledge tool. So we want to democratize this system using internet tools for action. You also have objectives and sub-objectives and beneficiaries who are stakeholders. They are partners, and at the same time beneficiaries. To the left you have institutions within this program. You have the Commission, the member states, and financial partners. And beneficiaries, of course, are mainly states and higher learning institutions, but also individuals within this system who are benefit from what we can bring to the table within the region. We have this policy implementation framework. In the middle you have our objective, which is training. You have learners and transfer of technology. And after that you have the middle circle is actors. You have training, practice, and to the right you have actors, and a little lower you have the components. You also have states and institutions and citizens who benefit from this logical framework. This program, the e-learning, the ECOWAS e-learning, it has a governance framework. You have the Commission, and within the Commission you have Education Commission, you have a sub-commission, the IT sub-commission. And those are two pillars who allow to implement this program. We also have a steering committee, the board, with ECOWAS partners. We have a technical committee, and that's a pool, which is an informed pool working in the IT area. And we lastly have the project implementation unit in every country. We have a focal point that ensures the organization and coordination of the activities within this program. Opportunities that are being developed, that is in progress. We partner with WACREN and their national networks, which is easily used by ECOWAS to implement activities on the ground. We can help those countries, WACREN as a regional organization, but also various countries to mobilize. For instance, how do you call it again? We have regulatory bodies within countries. We can quickly request countries to provide funding to facilitate conducting activities in the country. We have ministerial meetings within ECOWAS, biannual. The next one will be in September in Lomé. And the ministers will provide loans to facilitate the operational running of this organization. We count on the country's contributions to implement that kind of program. We also have ECOWAS parliamentarians. We have 150 of them within different countries, and those are our pillars based on whom we conduct our activities, but also to vote laws that protect, that influence actions and for the coherence of our internal development based on our own resources. And on May 5th, last Friday, we funded a parliamentarian meeting in Niamey, about $300 million, and to explain what's going on around these ICTs, and to know why within different protocols in different countries we need to know who does what, because we have money that comes from various donors with different visions sometimes. So that awareness raising has resulted in a network of parliamentarians with ethics. So the same thing with judiciary court within ECOWAS, to focus on what is needed in terms of legal information in case of issues. How does the judiciary handle conflicts that may result from activities that some partners or pirates can get involved in within the region? That's briefly what I wanted to share with you today on what we do at ECOWAS, and we intend to set up a big program, and within the African Union we have a similar vision, so Africa can have a good vision with using ICTs to reinforce our human capital, as our UNESCO colleague has said, to achieve SDG number 4, to accelerate, if you want, the human capital that we need. That's briefly what I wanted to share with you. I was given 10 minutes. I've used 12. I thank you.
That's really excellent. Thank you, and we'll have questions and answers by the end of this session. So thank you again. Now, Research and Education Network for West Africa, West and Central Africa. Our colleague, Dr. Boubakar Bari, will be talking about WACREN. He's the CEO of WACREN. So Boubakar, the floor is yours now. I hope you will commit to the time. Thank you.
Je vais tenter de.
I'll try to be brief. We've been talking about e-learning, innovation, education resources. We've been talking about open data, but all that will only be possible if we have the required infrastructure to access it. Objective in West and Central Africa is also, and also with our West African and Southern African and Northern African partners, is to set up a good infrastructure to achieve that innovation and open data and e-learning. I'm going to talk about WACREN network. Let me talk about research and educational networks first. Maybe everyone is not familiar with that. Research and educational network are closed networks, intranets. It has a national dimension. So those are higher learning institutions in general, but it can also be about high schools and elementary schools as well, etc. Interconnecting those institutions would result into a collaboration platform to better use our resources. So if you share those resources on a national level and promote collaboration among researchers and teachers, this is extremely important. People often confuse research and education networks with internet. It's different. But those networks, research networks, use internet technology. The most important thing is to have such a platform that will allow to put those resources together. So that infrastructure is exclusively dedicated to education and research. However, this network allows to access what we call commodity internet and commercial internet. Those networks are innovation platforms. And it's about environments that promote innovation and different models, economic models. We have research and educational are hybrid with members. Let's talk about the ecosystem within these networks. In Africa today we have 3 main regional education and research networks. The first one is Ubuntu Alliance with Pascal, who will be talking about that, created in 2005, which is a southern and East African network with 16 members. We have ASREN from Northern Africa, which is the Arab state network. It's not only Northern Africa, but Middle East as well, as members of ASREN. This was created in 2010 with, let's say, 6 members, especially the IRST in Morocco, and Sudan, CSECA in Sudan. The colleague is here. And we have EUN from Egypt and Algeria. So then we have WACREN that covers West Africa and Central Africa, and today has 13 members. Here are the members, 11 of them, with NREN. That's National Education and Research Networks. You have the list here. We also have what we call associate members with Grenatel in France. We also have EcoConnect, a cluster of higher learning institutions around Lagos. This is the region that is covered here. The format has changed since we've changed the laptops, but this is the region covered by WACREN, 22 countries with with a specific nature because of their potential between WACREN and ASREN, and you were talking about Mauritania and the Democratic Republic of Congo, which can be a bridge between WACREN and Ubuntu Net Alliance. This is what we suggest as technology. At WACREN, we want to have a backbone of multiple giga per second. We're going to start with 10 giga, then 30 to 40. We want every country to be connected to that backbone by at least 1 giga per second. So every country is going to have 1, 2, 3 gigas, etc. And we can improve from there. So we want to give them, we want to have 3 to 4 main hubs. And those will be in Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Nigeria, or Senegal, where the number is more than 3 to 4, but it will depend on the location of the hub and the availability of infrastructure within those countries, with the cables available and the connection costs to connect those different countries. Like I said, there will be links to other countries without hubs, so they can have redundancy. We have connection to global education and research networks through London and Paris or Marseille. Today, we want to use existing infrastructure in the sub-region, the existing cables, to establish the network. That's briefly how it's going to look. We have a backbone from You don't see that because the format has changed on the screen, but it's going to start from Gabon, go to Nigeria, Cameroon, all the way up to Benin, Ghana, Senegal, Ivory Coast. And the links you have here, orange, are the links to countries who are not coastal. Those landlocked countries will be using land fiber optic cables to those countries. Now, today we focus on implementing these networks. We want to operationalize this, and it's mainly through contributions by the European Union that have provided funding around 26 million euros for 2015 to 2018, and the objective being supporting national education and research networks to interconnect and strengthen the links to global networks through high-speed connections and through the GEAN and then and RECLARA in Latin America, those in Asia and the US. To implement this project, we have three clusters. The education and research networks. You have Ubuntu Alliance, WACREN, and ASREN. And in this project, the European Union provides 80% of the budget. Like I said earlier, 27 million euros, and the beneficiaries or ASREN contribute together the remaining 20% to this budget. So you have local contributions. The commissioner stated earlier, our philosophy at ECOWAS is to first rely on our own resources. So we have a collaboration momentum. So this is an example of the collaboration that we can have using our own resources to move forward. So how far have we come with the implementation? The project started in June 2015, and at WACREN, and of course within our sister organizations and other alliances and ASREN, every participating body contributes to 20% in this project. And at WACREN, we have 10 countries participating, and countries have signed with Togo, Mali, Ivory Coast, and last week Burkina Faso. We're in the last phases of negotiations with Nigeria, Ghana to come on board this initiative. Implementation, of course, is a process of bidding and with connectivity and the hardware, network hardware, and the process started in June 2016, and we've had the last offers from operators, and very soon we'll select the best offers. We were also in discussions with the operators for land connections for landlocked countries like Burkina Faso from Ivory Coast, or Ghana, or Ivory Coast, or Senegal. So we're doing those kinds of discussions and negotiations. So within 10 days, we'll meet with those bidders for hardware equipment. So within the third or fourth quarter 2017, we can have this up and running, this WACREN network up and running. The objective being, obviously, if you look at this map, all regional education and research networks in the US, Europe, Latin America, Asia are connected to a global network that will allow using the same resources globally and collaboration. And today we have West and Central African region that are not connected to this global network, and we want to change this trend. Naturally, with the help of institutions like ECOWAS. And I thank you. If you want to contact WACREN, here is the website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boubakar. Now I have a question to Nanjira Sambuli. Yeah, my question is why we need to react to the growing digital gender gap. Yeah. So Nanjira is from Digital Advocacy Manager at the Web Foundation.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, more details about the speakers. I'm sorry I did not well introduce them well, so you can find them on the website because we are short of time.
Well, good afternoon. I think it's officially, yes, right on the mark. Good afternoon, everyone. I know you've been listening a lot, so I'll try and project a bit more to wake anyone who's still asleep or needs to grab a coffee. So I was asked a very direct question, why we need to react to the growing digital gender gap. And as I wait for the presentation to load, I'll just start by also asking another question, just a bit of interaction. So I want to see by a show of hands, how many here are representing ministries of education? Okay, none. Oh, one person, okay. Ministries of ICT? A bit more. Private sector? Okay. Everyone else? Civil society, I guess? Ministry of Higher Education? Ministry of Science and Technology-ish? Or a variation of that? Multilateral organizations? I think I asked, but I'll ask again, civil society? Okay, so we have a representation, if you will, of what we are calling multi-stakeholderism. And so basically what I'll be trying to present to you is how all the work that we're trying to do, because my colleagues on the panel have talked very interestingly about deep dives into networks of education. And one question listening to both of them was, well, we can have great e-learning platforms and formats, but where are the people who should be using them connected? And do they have meaningful access? So that is one of the questions, or one answer to why we must react to the growing digital gender gap. So I'll jump right into it. And why I wanted to focus on this, and thanks to Dawit for letting me bulldoze to discuss this issue and bring it to this conversation, is that a lot of the conversations we're having about connecting the next billion are quite gender blind in how they're articulated in policy. So there seems to be an operating thinking that, lay out fiber optic cables and the people will be connected. Let's make sure there are mobile phones in the market and people will be connected. But what has happened over the last 20 years or so, if there's one thing that policy has shown us, is a gender blind policy does not work. And what I mean by that is if you do not have very specific considerations for how the gender perspective plays out across the board, predating the internet or ICTs, and how that translates to how ICTs are adopted and used, we're going to be benching half the team that's supposed to be playing for the Africa team, if you will. And that's why we focus on how women access and use the web at the Web Foundation, because we realize that much as we're hearing great stories about connectivity across the continent, what the mobile phones have done, one of the things that's missing is that we're not actually realizing that women are much less connected. And that means this digital gender gap is going to be a problem down the line, and it's going to cost us already based on what we're already investing. So we conducted a study just to understand how women are accessing and using the web across the global south. So we focused on Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And I'll be sharing perspectives specifically from the countries in Africa, the 6 countries that we looked at. But the global snapshot is women are 30 to 50% less likely to use the internet than the men. And this is when we control for age, income, education. And this is actually becoming worse. The ITU found that that gender gap has grown in the last year alone, much as mobile phones and internet connectivity is becoming more and more accessible. So this is a stark finding. I must qualify it by saying we did a study in urban areas, in poor urban areas across 6 cities in Africa, because we figured, we talk about connectivity being almost ubiquitous in the capital cities, but we wanted to look at how that actually plays out for people who are living in those areas, but other factors may prevent them from getting connected. Now, these are some of the things that were cited by women about what are the barriers to access and use. Right at the top, there is know-how. What am I using it for? Where am I supposed to be connecting? It's really interesting to find. Cost is closely related to that, and that's cost of devices, but also the cost of broadband, whether it's mobile, whether it's internet access in the home and such. Then relevant content and services was a close one as well. So fine, I'm connecting, and then what? How is that going to help me? How is that going to, in the 24 hours that I have to do 1,000 things, why is that something I should dedicate time to, as you can see there. Now, I want to also highlight other, where the chilling effects of what is happening to women online, harassment, this has been mentioned before, was also a big thing. So you can see how that incentivizes people from getting connected. Now, based on that, we did what we called gender digital gap audits, which we looked at 14 simple indicators across 5 themes of how countries are faring in connecting all their citizens, but specifically women. Now, I know the numbers can't be seen, but the really dark ones are either 1 or 2. And we looked at it across 5 key areas: access and empowerment, affordability, digital skills and education, which is the focus of what we're talking about here, closely related to that being relevant content and services, and online safety. All this is available online, but I want us to just focus on the overall score for a minute. We have Egypt at 30%, and I can qualify that later. Ghana 30%, Kenya at 30%, Mozambique at 20%, Nigeria at 30%, Uganda at 30%. Now, if you remember going back home with a scorecard that read 20% or 30%, what would happen? I see looks of people remembering what that was like taking home, a score less than expected. But what this was a ranking is just across those indicators we looked at, like, does a country collect data on how men versus women are connecting to the internet? So if you have a regulator, do they have numbers of men versus women who have mobile phones? Men versus women who connect to the internet? These statistics exist, but somehow, for some reason, we've not considered it important to collect it and share it back that way, because that's how we actually start to to better assess who's not connected and why. And this is how, based on some of the statistics, for instance, that are submitted to the ITU, we're able to find many countries across the board. In fact, in this list is only Egypt that submits gender disaggregated data to the ITU. We also looked at policies around broadband policies, national ICT policies, and whether they had gender-specific targets. And in line especially with the SDGs that call for empowerment of women and girls using technology, we need to start having a very serious conversation about how we make policies that make sure all are connected, but very specific targets that to speak to why women are not connected. So the REACT element really speaks to 5 things. It's a framework that we call REACT for the following reasons. For anything we're trying to do to connect everyone, men and women alike, there's a focus on rights that we must have, which is the online rights and privacy laws, because the chilling effects, as I mentioned earlier, are already a disincentive even for those who are not connected. If I hear a story of Aminata being harassed online and I'm not connected, the incentive to then get connected and use the platforms, the e-learning platforms, can be taken away. I'll come back to education in a bit, but I wanted to talk about affordable access because of listening to our colleagues there, and they have great frameworks, and I thought For the people who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of those platforms, how are they connecting? What forms are they supposed to be connecting to use those platforms? And how much does it cost them? Because even if we roll out all the mass online education portals, if we roll out the best, cool, next app that is supposed to be liberate education, the people who are supposed to be using that information, can they afford to be online? Can they afford to remain online? Who are they? And if we don't ask those questions, whether it's from the education side or from the ICT side, we risk building great things that just don't speak to each other and don't serve the purpose that we are saying we want to serve here. Now, relevant content as well has been a very interesting one. And I think in the opening session, somebody mentioned about localizing language. And this also relates to our own people going to be creators of the web, or are they just being posited to be consumers on the web? So how do we make sure that as people are getting connected, they feel that they can also create the content they want to see there, so that it's not just about everyone saying, well, I tried to get online, but there's nothing relevant for me. I mentioned targets earlier, and this is where I was asking about the policymakers in the room, because this is where all this is all linked to policy, and policy failure is the problem here, or policy innovation and solution is just as important as tech innovation and entrepreneurship. In the sense that if we do not have holistic policies that capture these elements, and by that I mean three things. If we're not collecting disaggregated data on how men versus women are accessing and using the web, if we're not giving concrete budgetary allocations to how we're connecting these people, universal service funds, for instance, that were mentioned earlier, if those are not being used to connect people, to roll out the skills that they need, we're missing the mark. So going back to education as I wrap up, the thing here is I have listened a lot to discussions about what ICT and education could look like, and most often than not, it tends to become about coding, which is very, very important. But we must liberate the idea of digital skills and digital literacy beyond coding. That is just one big component. There are great programs being rolled out by many governments. For instance, in Kenya, where I'm from, we have the One Laptop Per Child program that has been the stuff of interesting developments. But one thing that comes to mind is once those children go home and they have these laptops that they're using in school, the tablets that they're using in school, they need to go home to an environment where they're encouraged to use those devices. So if your mother, who is your nurturer or primary caregiver, does not know how to use that tool to encourage you, what could that mean and what could that look like? So that's why we talk about, when we're saying digital literacy training, it has to go one beyond technical skills in the coding sense, but also be integrated across curricula right from primary to tertiary, and having solutions where those who are already out of the education system and want to learn about what these platforms look like have that opportunity. So this, for us, is a framework we look at that ties all these things together, because if I leave this room where we're focusing a lot on education, and I go right next door and they're talking about rights, maybe the next door they're talking about affordable access. How do all these things come together? And so this is a framework upon which we're saying, if policymakers heed this and take on these recommendations, we might actually connect the next billion meaningfully and accessibly. And with that, I hope I've answered your question about why we must react. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being exactly on time. Another question, can MOOCs solve Africans' educational challenges? This question will be answered by Dr. Aminata Garba. She is Associate Professor at the Carnegie Mellon University in Kigali. You have the question now.
Thank you very much. So I will start talking about some of the education challenges in Africa, and then try to discuss, not answer the question, but discuss with you whether or not MOOCs are solutions for these challenges in Africa. So some of the challenges in Africa is really the quantity. How many people are educated? And this number decreases as we're going higher education. So usually African countries are doing good good enough when we talk about primary education. As we're going up and at the college, people start dropping, or people are not capable of having higher education. And we look at it as a pyramid where we are going lower and lower. So the number is an issue. Around 6% of the people in higher education, it's really low. And Africa is expected to have the highest number of youth by 2050, more than billion, according to some of the statistics. So how can we actually offer education to this billion of people, youth, in future? The cost of education is also a challenge. Compared to the GDP, most of the people cannot afford to offer higher education to the kids. And then the quality. Sometimes we have shortage of qualified teachers and limited resources. Most of the schools don't have access to internet, energy, etc. So let me show some statistics, but before that, actually, I would like to say that these challenges impact not only the economy. We know that we have economic impact because we have less qualified people, so that really impacts the economy a lot. But also the social. It's creating a huge gap where we have a small middle class, and then we have a large poor class and a small high class. So if we are capable of increasing the number of higher educated people, this middle class will be capable of growing, and that will actually solve some social issues as well. So the issue is not only economic but also social. So let's look at these statistics. Hopefully you can see something. These are coming from UNESCO database, and if we look here, this is the literacy rate in Africa compared to the other region, and we can see that Africa is really, this is sub-Saharan Africa only, it's doing very poorly, around 65%, compared to the majority who is having 95 and more as literacy rate. Now, if we look absolute values, we can see that in sub-Saharan Africa, when we talk about educated, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. And then in developed countries, we're talking about 10 of millions. So the absolute gap is even higher than when we compare to the percentage. Here I'm talking about people 15 and more. So I'm not looking at the base, the primary, because in that case, Africa is doing okay. So let's look at here. This is the how much African governments are putting in education compared to the GDP. Most of the countries are putting something around 1% or less of the GDP in education. And then we have a few countries which are putting more. Who can guess which countries? This in green, like 4% of the GDP. Can anybody guess? No, Botswana. This is Botswana. They have diamonds and the population is small, so they're putting around 4% of the GDP in education. But most of the African countries are going between 0.5 to 1.5% of the GDP. And this is all education. However, if we look at the expenditure they put compared to the overall expenditure, actually they're putting around between 15 to 30% of the expenditure in education. So if we compare to overall what they spend, they're putting up to, in average, around 20% in education, which we cannot say that it's a bad amount. Actually, they're making effort. When you put 20% of your income in something, so it's considered to be a priority. So the issue may not be how much they put according to their income, is maybe how they put it, or maybe they need different financial system to kind of improve the education. So let me talk about MOOCs. Really, MOOCs, as I guess everybody knows here, is really open online course. They're targeting a lot of people, massive. And how can they have a lot of people is using internet. They have been introduced around 2006, but it's really around 2012 that it was taking off. The course material are available on internet. They have the assignments, everything available on internet. What does that mean? To be able to use MOOC, you really need to have internet access. So The approach they use is open license versus closed license. So when you have the open license or closed license, most of the time the course is available, but they don't share some of the material with you if it is a closed license, maybe some of the structure, some of the course objective, etc. You have also free versus paid. Most of the MOOCs are free. However, when they provide you a certificate for the course, they can ask a fee. Now, if you don't have this fee, you can take the course, but you wouldn't have the certificate for having taken the course. And some of the popular MOOCs platform are Coursera, which were opened by some professors from Stanford. You have Udacity, TEDx, which is actually free from MIT. Everything is free. Now, MOOCs in education in Africa, really, now I want to compare how can MOOC maybe impact the education in Africa or not. To start with, they target higher education. So if we are talking about trying to use MOOC for the last level, lower level, that's not really the objective of MOOCs are they here now. They're targeting higher education. And because we know that higher education, we already have a small number, so we're limited in the quantity. One other thing is most of the MOOCs don't offer a degree, and it's not very well structured. The courses are structured, but not structured enough to offer a degree. However, they partner with some universities to offer the degree. The universities can use the MOOCs platform for the courses, and you can have a degree from the university. In that case, it's most likely a paid. You have to pay, and the costs are not cheap because most of them are Western universities, and they required good internet access for people to be able to use the data which is uploaded there. And we know that most of the schools in Africa, when we look at the challenge, they don't have this good of internet access. Sometimes teachers themselves may not be ICT skilled. So if the teacher doesn't have the skill, how can they help students to use even a platform which is available? So as implemented, I think, that's my personal opinion, you may have a different opinion, that MOOCs will likely have marginal impact in the quantity. I don't think that they can help increase this 6% of the people. And if they do it, it can increase, but not to go to 20 or 30% as they are implemented now. So what about the quality? Can it increase the quality of education? Because we know that in some cases, the issue is also the quality. We may not have enough teachers which are qualified. We may not have a curriculum which is up to date. And maybe in that case, MOOCs can be used to help increase the quality of education in Africa. So let me conclude here by saying that as the MOOCs are implemented today, they may not have a huge impact on increasing the number of educated people in higher education especially. They can, however, help to increase the quality of education. Even in that case, there are requirements. We need to have internet access. It's not enough as just to have the platform. You cannot use it without a good internet access. We need to have teachers to be trained to offer these MOOCs to the students. They should not be completely unstructured. We need to have put structure on the MOOCs to offer them in Africa. Extend maybe the platforms to higher schools if we want to target lower levels. And because the issue in Africa, when we look at how much the government are putting in education according to the expenditures, I don't think that we can say that they don't do efforts. So maybe they need to partners, having some private partnerships, private and public partnerships, or having some different financial models, because we cannot expect them to put 80% of the expenditures in education. And maybe new models are required for Africa. Maybe we need to have some offline material because we don't have enough internet access. And this is already being offered in some cases, having some offline course, and then when the internet is there, synchronize to update the material. Create some hubs for instructor to be on site and help students to take the courses, and maybe accept also some business model, so have some certificates which are acceptable for businesses that will really encourage more and more students to use the MOOCs. Thank you.
Thank you again. Now we have time for questions and answers, so we are ready. Anyone who wants to ask a question, just mention his name, his institution, and to whom his question is for. So questions and answers are open now.
That's okay. I can just a quick question with respect to the last slide. My name is Hamidou Yousef. I'm the Director General of Computing Center in Tunisia. So I manage the National Research and Education Network within Tunisia for the academic community and the research community as well. Just for the last slide, you made the recommendation as to the most appropriate model for African countries to, so that MOOCs can have good impact on education in general, not necessarily higher education, but in education in general. And you listed, I think, 3 things. Are they listed with priorities, or just because offline access? And then can you elaborate mainly on the last one, where you mentioned the business type of, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Thank you for your question. So no, I didn't list them with any priority. I'm just brainstorming and expecting that the discussion will actually help bring solutions. So for the last one, for the business, one of the issues which is that businesses are saying that they don't have enough qualified people. And sometimes they have to go find experts and who are costly for them. And at the same time, people are there without having a job. In average, an African person, young who graduates can wait up to 5 to 6 years before getting a job. And so we have this issue where you have a lot of people available, not a lot for the business, but some people available, but they are said to be not qualified. So if the MOOCs can use this goal of bridging the gap between the universities and the business, that can be a model which will be helpful also to increase the quality of education. So this is what I meant by this last point.
Thank you. My name is Not Dumo Dlamini. I work for the Association of African Universities. I have a question for Ms. Nanjira Sambuli, or it's really to say I have a problem with the word react, because it implies that we wait until something has happened, then we respond. So I would prefer the word proactive, to something related to us, being more proactive, planning ahead. So it's really just a comment. Thank you.
Should I just start? Yeah, real quick. As the mic goes to the next person, it's actually an acronym for the 5 areas we need to focus on for digital equality. So yes, by being proactive, we react proactively. And I'll just, for recap, focusing on rights. So R is rights, E is education, A is affordable access, C is content, and T is targets and policy. So we react proactively to address the digital equality. Yeah.
Good answer.
Yes, my name is Isaac Kasana from Research and Education Network for Uganda. My question is also to Ms. Sambuli, or comment. I actually feel that I work with a group of young technical people who are female, who want to improve the participation of ladies in technical jobs and careers. I somehow feel that the analysis for gender issues is not comprehensive. For example, the framework you shared with us had 5 areas, but I feel that some of the things which stop women from participating in ICT may actually not be external. For example, many ladies are preoccupied with other things quite often. Do you agree with that? They have other things which men don't always, which are not, don't exist for men. For example, children, family, things like that. Then the way they structure their spending of their income is also different. So for me, I think also those things which are intrinsic to the needs of women need to be taken into account when you're doing that analysis.
You're very right as the mic goes around, but I must say that the social-political factors have to be factored everywhere in every aspect that we're talking about. And that's why many women said lack of know-how and time to do that. But if women are shown how to do it, and there have other studies that have shown, once women understand what the internet could do for them economically, politically, civically, they are the first to invest and make sure the household is connected. So those factors are all about how we address them. You're right on the mark about that. But that framework is specifically for policymakers in ICT education and elsewhere to get to the table together and see how they need to work together.
So all questions are going to women. So this is complication.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Mike, I am Langlum. I'm from the University of the Gambia and ISHOC Gambia chapter. My first question goes to Dr. Barry about the NREN. I want to know the state of Gambia in regards to NREN and what are the work being done in terms of getting Gambia on the NREN. From your presentation, I can tell that it's not part of it, and how can that be achieved? And the other question is for Dr. Adam. You also mentioned about the 5% usage of bandwidth in West Africa, especially for Gambia in that regard. So I want to know what are the reasons for this, and what are maybe the possible solutions to get more people utilize the remaining 95% bandwidth. Thank you.
Yes, a good question. Why Gambia is not part of it yet? Well, we have been trying to engage the Gambia as far back as 2012, when we organized, the first, let's say, edition of the African Internet Summit. That used to be ASREN, AFNOC, annual meetings. I'm sure you know Dr. Hamidou, who was then the Vice Chancellor of the University of the Gambia, but she has left in the meantime. But we have also tried to engage with, I'm sure you know Alaji Sise and others who is also at ISOC. We have not succeeded yet. But a couple of weeks ago, so we got some support from somebody who has taken maybe a sabbatical to go to the Gambia, and we do hope that with that person being very engaged in that person comes from the Italian, NREN, and is very interested, in, having an environment, where that she knew, when she's in Italy. So we do hope that in the next couple of, let's say months, we would be able to engage with the Gambia, especially when we know that the Gambia, has an excess capacity, on the submarine cable, they're part of. So there is a good opportunity to engage with the Gambia, because it won't be a problem to link them with other countries. So that is something we are working on.
So Gambia would be the next?
Well, probably. Maybe not the Gambia, but I think Nigeria, maybe Ghana, and then the Gambia.
I think the study, we just found out that I think one of the challenges in Gambia, which is similar to the rest of most of the African countries, is strong incumbency. For instance, GAMTIL controlling basically the critical infrastructure, the national backbone, at the same time also controlling, international gateway. That was one of the challenge. The second challenge we found out is that the lack of the vision, for instance, taking this available bandwidth and then trying to really use it for socio-economic development. Interestingly, in Gambia, the competition, you know, with the private sector, internet service provider is very, very high. They are eager really to move forward. I think the bottleneck seems to be within the strong incumbency. The other challenge we found out is that there is a bit of asymmetry between what the GAMTEL knows and then of course what Pura actually knows, and then there is a bit of really capacity within the Pura to really enforce and then to really think through the regulatory framework. I think it's similar to the other countries. So I think the policy is important. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges, of course, the situation in Gambia prior to election. There's also governance and control issues, I think, which is now tend to be changing dramatically with the new election. I think we are hoping that after this election and after the change of the government, things might really improve and a good policy will be put together and the capacity will be used. Thank you.
Dr. Iskandar, Director of National E-Learning Center, Supreme Council of Egyptian University. I want to ask about MOOCs because in Egypt, in our center, we built a platform for MOOCs, edX MOOCs, I think, and we will put in it maybe 700 courses in this year. But we cannot in Egypt give a certificate to any student. I want to know in your university what you do. If you give a student a certificate or not, or what. Okay, it's because it's important for our student in Egypt. That's.
So thank you for your question. So actually, most of the MOOCs, initially when they started, they were not offering any certificate. So I will say that it's the easy way to start. So we have to start somewhere. And even Coursera, when they started, they were not offering certificates. However, it was shown that when students credits from some universities, and in that case, they will pay less. So that can motivate them better to take the course, to understand, and sometimes they also show the certificates to businesses, and that also help them to secure the job. So moving towards the model of certification can be a good idea, but I will say to start with, it's really easy to offer the course, and people can be motivated not only for the certificate, but only to understand. Some people really need to know, and sometimes they already have a job. They want to learn more about it and then perform better. So I think that even offering the courses without certificate is already a good initiative. It's just like something which should be thought about. And most importantly, maybe putting a little bit of structure. The way they are offered in these big platforms, students really need to be motivated. So sometimes having some structures like you did in your university can help students taking the course for understanding. Thank you.
Okay, one last question, Pascal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to have your view on, and this is all the panelists. You know, in terms of content, we now see in the scene that some big companies are coming with to provide content. You know, Microsoft, Google, and others. What do you think? What should be African strategy? Should we let institutions discuss directly one by one with those big companies, or should we have a regional strategy? I would like to hear your view about it, because it's something that we need to plan it very seriously. Thank you. Well, I can start.
You can answer because we.
Oh, okay, because, well, this is my personal view. We have been confronted, you know, with this issue for a couple of years now. And we also have been discussing, you know, with with big players, who have the infrastructure and also offer some services, to universities. Well, if I go back a couple of years ago, when I was at the Association of African Universities, we engaged, with let's say such companies, and to recommend, that they rather try to discuss, with let's say larger bodies, at national level or at a regional level, because we are in a process of building communities, bringing higher education research institutions together, and the fact, to go and to go and to talk to the institution individually doesn't help us build this kind of communities. And the other point is that if they go and present something to a head of an institution, he may not have the full picture on what it entails, maybe there are some, consequences, that are not immediate, but have, in the future, for the strategy, of the institution, of the country and a whole. So what we really recommend that is, to rather talk to national institution or to regional institution to have a common approach, because what they offer might be good, in the first place. But we may also have our views, on how to implement, what they're proposing. But having it done, institution by institution, in my view, is not the best way to proceed.
Okay, thank you. By this, I think we have a very good session, a very good discussion, and very good presentation. So allow me to thank the organizers, the speakers, and the the audience for your asking the questions. So thank you, and join me in thanking everybody. And I will hand this now to the organizers. Thank you again.
Thank you, Moderator, Mr. Yousef. And also I'd like to thank our former moderator for the previous